Welcome to our final panel of Broadleaf 8, and let me tell you what an amazing weekend, right? I'm very excited about this panel. It has the best title, Wear the Right Shoes, the Many Paths to Publication. I'm sure that that's like everyone's goal, whether you have never been published before or you're being published now and want to continue a career in publishing. So I'm really excited about what our guests today have to say about their personal journeys. But I know that we've had probably several introductions, but I want to make sure everyone knows our panelists today. Directly to my left, we have Beverly J. Armento, and I love this. Inspired by many teachers that she has had, she became an educator and enjoyed a multi-decade career working with middle school children. So that's Purple Heart work right there. And prospective students, and prospective teachers. Retired now, she is a professor emerita at Georgia State University in Atlanta. She holds degrees from the William Patterson University, New Jersey, Purdue University, Indiana, and Indiana University. She currently lives in Atlanta, where she enjoys staying in touch with her old students and many friends, reading, writing, and gardening. Beverly's debut memoir, Seeing Eye Girl, was awarded as the most moving book for 2023.
Wow.
Next, I'd like to introduce Veena Rao. She is an award-winning Indian American author and journalist. She is the founder, publisher, and editor-in-chief at NRI Pulse, an Atlanta-based newspaper that serves the South Asian communities of the U.S. She has been recognized by the Limca Book of Records, it's the Indian version of the Guinness Book of Records, as the first Indian woman to edit and publish a newspaper outside India. Her debut novel, Purple Lotus, is a 2021 American Fiction Award winner, a 2021 Georgia Author of the Year finalist, and an award-winning finalist in the Multicultural and Women's Fiction categories of the 2021 International Book Awards. Veena is a devoted advocate for victims of domestic and sexual abuse as a board member of Saris to Suits, an Atlanta-based nonprofit. She's also passionate about promoting South Asian literary voices, in the U.S. through her news publication and as a program coordinator for the Trasal, T-R-A-S-A-L Literary Festival. And on the far end, dressed fabulously, we have Jeffrey Dale Lofton. He hails from Warm Springs, Georgia. We all know now that is the home of Roosevelt's Little White House. Calls the nation's capital his home now and has been there for 3 decades. He is a senior advisor at the Library of Congress, where he is surrounded by books and people who love books. What an amazing job. So, as he says in Short of Paradise, I agree.
Yeah.
Red Clay Susie is his first novel, a fictionalized memoir written through his personal lens, growing up a gay, physically misshapen outsider in a conservative family and community in the Deep South. It was recently longlisted for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize, named a Forward Indies Silver Book of the Year, and awarded the Seven Hills Literary Prize for Fiction. And you can learn more about Jeffrey at his website, jeffreydlofton.com. So, welcome. So, as someone who is a writer myself, I'm Crystal O'Leary Davidson, and I'm also a writer, and I'm a teacher at Middle Georgia State University. And I probably want to ask this question of every single writer that I meet. So I'd like to start off by asking each of the panelists to describe their path to publication.
Well, I must start by saying it was a long path. And in retrospect, even though I thought I kind of knew something, I was really very naive and ignorant of the range of choices as well as the consequences of choosing X or Y or Z. And like many of us, I thought, of course it's gonna be a big boy. Are they all boys? Or a big girl? And I was reinforced in that thought. Twice a year, I went to the Atlanta Writers Conference and I pitched in person and I submitted 50 pages of the manuscript in person to agents and editors. And without fail, for a number of years, twice a year, I came home with a great big Best Manuscript, Best Pitch award. I can't tell you how many awards. I never went away empty-handed. They loved it, or so I thought. They all said, send the manuscript. I did. And that was about the last time I heard from most of them. And after kind of prompting them, remember me? I'm the short one. You know, and every once in a while you get a response like, you know, it's really good, I really like this, but it doesn't fit my list, or but I don't quite have the bandwidth, or, you know, whatever. So, really, it was probably about 5 years of that, thinking, you know, it's the traditional publisher, and one of them is gonna bite. You know, finally I said, you know, girlfriend, you're not getting any younger, and what are you waiting for? Because by that time I thought I had a pretty decent manuscript, it was clean, it had been critiqued forever, and I thought, okay. And meanwhile, I mean, I was cold querying agents this whole time, all those years. And, you know, that takes a lot of time and energy and effort to find the right ones, then to query and then to personalize the query every time, all of that. So I thought I was doing my job of trying to find someone. But at a certain point, I did start looking at independent houses. And I was familiar with She Writes Press, because years before I had taken a class with She Writes online, write your memoir in 6 months. Well, it took a little more than 6 months, but nevertheless, it did get written. And so I thought, okay, they're in my collection of independent houses. So I pitched a couple of them, you know, whatever they asked for, I sent them 50 pages, the whole thing, whatever. And She Writes loved it. And they put me in what they call the first track, which is, it's clean copy, it's gonna get all the editing, nevertheless, but you don't have to do any really real rewriting at this point. So She Writes Press is an independent press. They publish 100 to 150 books annually. It's all women, run by women, all the authors are women. Mainly memoir, but not exclusively memoir. Based in California, and the hybrid part means that the author picks up really most of the financial outlay for the publication of the books, the printing of the books. Now, I own all the books in the warehouse. There's a contract, of course, that gives you lots of opportunities to say yes, no. I want these rights, you can have these rights. And everything about the process, to my understanding, is just like a traditional press. From the gateway in to the process to get out, to get to a published, presentable book. There is a distribution system through Ingram, However, the bottom line turns out that it's primarily Amazon and whatever small independent bookstores you can convince to place your book there. I won't tell you all the pros and cons, but that's sort of the route, and that's where I ended up.
And we just discovered that we share the same publisher.
I'm so happy to find you.
Me too, likewise. Okay, so my book, Purple Lotus, which is my debut novel, is about a brown immigrant who makes the American South her home. And it took me 10 years of writing and querying to ultimately find a publisher. You know, I never did find an agent, never did, because I think it could partly be because when I started the querying process in 2012, the publishing industry was a bit different, more afraid of taking risks, more accepting of diverse voices, and that might, fortunately that's changing now. So this is a good time to be a writer, I think, for diverse people, people from marginalized communities. Anyway, so finally in 2019, I came across this manuscript contest, which is hosted annually by my wonderful publisher, She Writes Press. It's a contest that's open to women of color, and I was so dejected and with all the rejections. I entered the contest and forgot about it. And 2 months later, I heard from my publisher that I had won the contest. And so winning the contest, it changed my life because it included not just a book deal, it also included a publicity deal, which is a huge, huge thing because publicity can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, I believe. So that was a life-changing moment for me. My book came out in September 2020, which was bang in the middle of the pandemic, when all the stores were closed, bookstores were closed, libraries were closed. There was no way we could have a book tour, could not even think of it. But I think eventually my book did find its way into the hands of readers, and I've been very fortunate that way. So that's the story of my publication of my book.
So I did a lot of reading, everything that I could get my hands on about how to get a literary agent. And there's quite a bit out there. But it was really sobering. Someone described it this way to me. They said, it's easier to get elected to the United States Congress than it is to get a literary agent. And I started to really believe that at some point. But I didn't give up. And I think that's really the message here, is to not give up. It's a numbers game, and to continue to query agents, tailoring your letters to their specific needs that they list on their websites, on their profiles. That's really important because you heard them. They they get a lot of queries, and they really are looking for those gems among so many submissions. So really following their guidelines and finding a way to match what you do, find what in your work matches what they're looking for is really important. But so I started to, I had a tangential connection to a publisher, an acquisitions editor at a publisher, a small independent press called Post Hill Press. This woman who is the acquisitions editor there, and my partner, they worked together very briefly on a project about 20 years ago. My partner Eric said, let's send it to her and see just the query letter. Like, let's send a query letter to her and see what she thinks about it, and she can give us some advice because she knows the industry. I said, okay, let's do that. So we sent the query letter to her, and she kept it for like a week or so, I think, and wrote back and said, just to understand it better, I'd like to see the manuscript. Can you send the manuscript so I can do that? And she wrote back in a few days. She said, well, your query letter is really good. I think it's a really fine query letter. It touches all the points. You need to, of course, customize it to whom, to the needs of the person, to the preferences of the person you're sending it. But you don't really need to, because I want to publish it. And I thought it was a prank. And, excuse me, my parents are trying to reach me. They've been texting me for the last hour. I got like 10 texts. I borrowed their car to come here. But I borrowed it, as I had permission. And she wants to know when to have dinner ready. So I was, I didn't expect that. That was an unexpected outcome, to say it a different way. And I asked for a little time, because I didn't want to go on this journey without a literary agent. But I didn't have one. So I bought some time, and I went full force querying agents. I sent out 2 or 3 letters, it seemed every day for a while. And I think it was the 35th or 36th letter, I got a couple of bites. But on the 35th or 36th letter, I got someone, and I'd sent her 3 pages. And she said, send me like 5 chapters, I think it was. A couple of days later, send me the manuscript. And she wrote back the next day, and she said, I want to represent you. So it's every writer's dream to find someone. She said, this is exactly the kind of thing that resonates with me, and it has purpose. It stands for something in the world, and of course my heart just soared and skipped a couple of beats. And then we talked about, and this is what, and I put in the very front of the first line in each of those query letters, I have an offer from a publisher. Yeah. Get some attention there. And she said, well, let's talk about this publisher. So we talked, and she did some research, and I said, the one thing that, I just don't want to go on this on my own. I said, understood. She said, so you got an offer, let's talk about it. And I told her the few things that I wanted to accomplish, which is I want to stand for something. I want to make a statement with this book. I want to help kids who are in crisis. And a couple of other things, like I ain't young. I want the book to be published. And so she did some research, talked to the acquisitions editor, and what I didn't really understand why they wanted my book, because they are known mostly for their non-fiction titles. This is a novel. And among those non-fiction titles, quite a few of them are written by arch conservatives.
Wow.
And this book is about as queer as it gets. As am I. And I said, I just don't understand why they want the book. But I did not ask the acquisitions editor that. And it came back that they wanted to diversify their catalog. And this acquisitions editor in particular is really focused on doing that, showing more diverse voices among their catalog. And in particular, wanting to build their fiction side of their catalog. And so so there were 3 things that made this really attractive. And my acquisition literary agent said, we could find another publisher, but they will publish it within a year, which is unusual. She said, if I take this on submission, it's going to be probably 2.5 or 3 years before it comes out. And so that was one thing that was attractive. The other was that, they wanted to diversify their catalog, and I liked being a part of that sort of laudable effort. I think it's really, I appreciate them wanting to do that, and I could help them do that by being an anomaly within their catalog. But also because I like the idea of being a disruptor and planting this little queer book in the midst of all those other titles that are not that. And that's how it happened.
Those are amazing stories. So I'm just thinking, listening to all 3 of you talk about your paths to publication. Beverly and Veena, you guys, you're at a publisher that is very focused on women's fiction. And Jeffrey, you're at a publisher that, while not normally a fit, they picked your book to diversify. So I'm just curious, are all 3 of you hoping or thinking about or planning to stay with your current publisher? Maybe on the next book.
Well, you want me to start? You know, one of the things you learn on this journey real fast are the pros and cons of your choices, the limitations and the joys. I am very happy with lots of things about my publisher. I love the cover, I love the book, I love the way the layout, I love the way I've been treated by the publisher. It's nothing but respect all the way. Their in-house editors are outstanding, their artistic staff, all of that is good. After the fact, I guess I realized a couple things that hit me sort of hard. One was that that there's really a class system in the world of publishing. Most of you probably know that already. I don't think I was really aware of that. Like, where was I? But, you know, there's a hierarchy, and it's very real in some people's minds, especially in some influentials. I had studied here in Atlanta creative nonfiction, and I don't think I'll mention the name, but a highly influential local writer, and who has a lot to say about who gets reviewed in the local newspapers. I'm probably getting too close. But in any case, she let me know pretty soon that while she loved the book, the HAC had a policy to not review books that were self-published. Then she and I had a little fight because this book is not self-published. And even if it were self-published, like, read it and judge it on the quality. Don't judge it on the category, your assumptions about the category. Anyway, that kind of marred our relationship a little tiny bit, but I think we're still good colleagues and friends. But she did run a feature on Pub Day. Here are 3 indies you should pay attention to. She called them indies in the title, but then in the text, she called them self-publishing again. So back and forth we went on. We still hadn't resolved that. And to this day, this is her opinion. I'm glad to see organizations like Georgia Writers has opened their big contest to self-published and independently published books. Like, hooray! So maybe some of the lines are getting blurred. There are also only certain contests I can submit my book to, and it's in a pool of other indie books. That's fine, but I can't compete with Random Penguin, Random House, or Simon Schuster, or any of the others. So, like, why not? So I really highly object to that. But the bottom line is, this book, your book, all these books are in the same market for readers. Where these books are in the same market for reviewers. At least reviews where they can be published. Goodreads, Amazon, wherever you can publish good reviews. We're in the same market for people to say, I want my book club to read your book, and I want you to come, or for whatever else comes with it. And for me, I think because of the messages of this book also is about what I call the invisible walking wounded, primarily those young people who carry the trauma of youth, no matter what the cause is, and those adult mentors, especially teachers, who sometimes doubt their impact. In my case, my survival was a function of my teachers. encouraging me. So this book has got important messages too, like all of our books do. And we're in that same, we're looking for the audience that these messages speak to. And so far so good, competing in that market. So far so good. I'm really pleased with that. And a lot of that is my own marketing and word of mouth, because this book is being propelled by word of mouth. It's a year old, came out July 5th, 2022. And I've already been to 30 book clubs. And I think that's a pretty good report. It's a good report. And giving 2 keynotes this fall to good-sized groups. I'm speaking to mental health groups. I've spoken to church groups that focus on mental health. So I'm in the arena that I want to be. Educators are paying attention. So, you know, so there I am. The next book, I'm gonna try. There is a next book in the works, and I'm gonna go back to my original thought of trying for a traditional publisher, I believe, just because of what I've learned. We'll see. We'll see.
Thank you.
Well, Beverly, I'm so sorry you had such a bad experience with AJC, because you know, my book was reviewed by Newsweek, Parade, Travel and Leisure.
And did your publicity company get that
Yes,
for you?
Bookspot.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So.
Wow.
Yes.
That's good.
So, you know, that has never been a problem, but for my next book, I might go the traditional route because I don't want to have to pay upfront to have my book published. That's a big deal, you know, with Shirai's Press or any other hybrid press. So yeah, I'm going to try to get an agent. Once again, it's going to be the whole process of querying. Hopefully it will be easier this time, because my first book has done reasonably well. And if it doesn't, if I don't find an agent, if I don't find a big 5 publisher, that's okay. I think indie press, university press,
Yes.
and hybrid press, we have several options. And as long as they have a good marketing network, that's all it takes. You know, all you want is for your books to end up in the hands of readers. That's all.
I don't really know how to answer the question because I don't have a book ready to go yet. I haven't got a book to my agent, and there's no offer from this particular publisher. So I don't have an answer for that one yet. Yeah.
And I know it's at the end of the conference, but maybe for just the sake of clarity, because I think maybe a few terms have been used, maybe could we have y'all or somebody kind of make that distinction again between self-published, that's probably pretty clear what that means, but indie versus traditional versus hybrid. Especially hybrid, I think that's a term a lot of us might not know.
I think hybrid, and there are a bunch of hybrid presses now. Who knew? But for She Writes, the basic economic concept is that the author is part of the publishing economic picture. So the publisher pays for the publishing and the printing costs, and in return receives a larger share of the profits. And that's basically the model. So one of the things that like some of the influentials we know object to is just that, the money part. Because you'll often hear people say, well, if you have to pay for it, you know, it's just, you sort of, you know, I guess they think that you're paying to pay to play. And that has not been my experience one bit. You know, everything was like the same of what I know a traditional publisher would do. They don't accept everything, for Pete's sake. There's a strong gatekeeping process in place. And, you know, they might accept some things that need a lot of work, but they don't take that in. They don't take that in until that work is accomplished in a satisfactory way. The fact is that my manuscript was really clean, and they could see that. You can see that, you know, when you know what you're reading for. So that's hybrid, essentially, and the reputation is because of the money. Yeah, you know, everything's a trade-off in life. Now, there are a lot of independent presses where there's no money involved, so they're a little cleaner in this whole process, and there are a lot of those. And to my knowledge, they pretty much operate like traditional presses do. There's gatekeeping at the entrance, and there are processes, quality processes all along the line, so that what you come out with is a high quality product. Self-publishing, you you pretty much do it all yourself with whatever help you choose to buy in for or to.
And Crystal, you had a question about the difference between, I think, independent and traditional. I think independent is really just about the size of the publisher. There's the large, the big five, and there's independent, but they're all traditional presses, I think. Just a minor distinction.
So sorry, is hybrid a blend between self-publishing and indie then?
I think
It's
that's
not self-publishing at all. It's not
Okay.
self-publishing. You go
Okay.
through the whole process. It's just that they expect you to pay upfront, and then you
Okay.
get a larger share of the proceeds. You get
Okay.
about 60% of the print
Yeah.
edition,
Yeah.
60% of the digital edition, and 40% of.
Okay, thanks for
the
clarifying.
Yes.
Right.
And from what I understand, the distinction that we're seeing here is that, as you said it very well, you're part of the economic model, so they're not gonna take anything because they're financially invested too. It's more like a partnership of
Yes,
sorts? Is
yes,
that-
yes.
Okay. I
Yes.
see. Oh.
Thank you.
Yes,
But I've heard that there are some so-called hybrid publishers who are not so reliable and don't have the same services. So I think I haven't gone your route, or gotten started on it, but I understand you have to be aware of some hybrid publishers, so you have to get recommendations as to their quality.
so the question or comment from one of our viewers, just for the live stream, is that there are hybrids that are different levels of legitimacy.
I think that's very true. I don't know the names of those groups, but our publisher, Brooke Warner, has written a number of articles about that. And, you know, people who run legitimate shops, high quality shops, are rightfully upset about all of this because they all want to call themselves, you know, as they want to look like they're as traditional as they can be. But so it demands of us to be good researchers and to kind of sort that out. You're left to figuring it out yourself a lot. Yeah.
I would add that I think it's probably like anything else. There are degrees of quality, among the range.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask each one of you what it was in your background that prepared you for your publishing journey, and that can be a life experience or an educational program or maybe a writers group that supported you. So maybe like far background and maybe immediate background that kind of prepared you to where you are right now. We'll start with Jeffrey at the other end.
Okay, the answer is absolutely nothing. I didn't know what I was doing, and so I made some really good choices by accident, and I made some not so great choices by accident. I did what felt right at the time and just trusted that it would all work itself out. I was very fortunate. My partner's background is in communications, and he has been, it's so lonely to go through any part of this process by yourself. Like the writing alone feels a lot, because you kind of have to do that on your own.
Yeah.
But the business side of it is so, it can be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
That's why a community like this, like this, Broadleaf is such a great resource, because you can find someone who can at least try to answer some questions or have a connection to someone who knows the answer. But for me, it was just, there was no strategic path. I didn't know what I was doing. But my partner, whose background is communications, has a very good sort of, logical, straightforward approach to analyzing and sorting things out. And that has been really what has been my saving point in this whole process. I could not have done it without him.
Well, I was going to say nothing has prepared me, but well, that's not entirely true, I guess, because I used to write short stories as a child. I used to write detective fiction, molded on, the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books that I used to read. And so, but then, because I was interested in reading, I went into journalism, and then I stopped writing fiction. I did no creative writing at all until much, much later, because life got in the way. I got married, had a baby, moved to the United States, launched a news publication of my own, which took all my energy, all my focus, all my time. And then around 2009, I think, I read a couple of books. I mentioned this in the other panel that I was on this morning. The books are both written by Khalid Hosseini, The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns. A friend of mine gave me these books, and I read them, and I felt so much in love with the protagonist that I was motivated to write a book of my own. And so I sat in front of a blank page, and the first two words I typed were the title of my book, Purple Lotus. And that's how I started writing, and I taught myself to write fiction as the story unfolded. But of course, I realized pretty quickly, not pretty quickly, after a couple of years, that was no good. Although in terms of craft, I think my book was pretty good. But it's just that it was very bloated, lots of unnecessary characters and scenes. So I hired a developmental editor who was brilliant. She helped me sculpt the book into shape. And I think whatever I have learned about writing is through this process of going back and forth with the developmental editor. And eventually my book seemed good enough to win a manuscript contest, so I think it was good.
Like you, I was a writer all my life. Loved to write, school newspapers, that sort of thing. Loved my English classes. And, as a college professor, I wrote a lot, and I always felt like my writing was accessible. It was not stuffy or, archaic. And, but as it came time to write the memoir that I thought I would always write, the story of my childhood, I realized I really was not facile with this creative nonfiction form. So I started taking classes. And through those classes, I was in critique groups for years. Often the same group of, usually women, there's one group I met with for over 10 years. Wonderful feedback, wonderful growth experience. And I think that prepared me a lot, like you also. I bought a developmental editor when I thought the manuscript was ready. And you know, he told me otherwise. And it's a better book, and I'm a better writer for that process. He really gave me some provocative, terribly helpful feedback, and an investment well made. So I guess all that brought me to the completed manuscript kind of stage. And again, I thought I knew something about the publishing world, but I really didn't. You know, I've got a degree in economics, but that did not inform me about this world. And I guess the writing experiences and classes that I had taken was mostly about writing, not about the business of it. And so, you know, I realized my failings at that point.
May I add one thing? I don't know if this is helpful, but there are two really good books that are about the business of writing, the writing business. And one is, I can't remember the name of it, but it's by Courtney Malm. I think like, it's not the way Somerset Maugham's last name is spelled, maybe M-A-U-M, but Courtney Malm. And maybe it's before and after the book deal. Maybe
I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's what
that's
it
it.
is.
Yeah.
Ah.
It's really good. And the other is Jane Friedman has a book as well, and I can't think of the name of her book either. But those two books are really, really helpful.
Everything Jane Friedman does is helpful.
Everything Jane
Yeah,
Friedman.
yeah.
What was the first one before and after?
Courtney Malm and Jane Friedman. If you Google those names and put how to navigate the publishing world, you'll
Yeah.
find them.
Veena and Beverly, you both use developmental editors. Jeffrey, did you use a developmental editor or anything like that?
I learned what a developmental editor was about 2 weeks ago. Someone said something, DE, something. I said, wait a minute, what is a DE? It's a developmental editor. I said, oh. So I went and did some research. I think, so I did have what she deemed herself as a book doctor. And I think she was actually a developmental editor. So, yes, I did. I just didn't know I had one.
We have such an interesting panel here because really, you know, all three of our guests have very alternative and very, I think, to my mind, new ways to navigate publishing. So I think we have time, of course, plenty of time for questions.
I just wanted to piggyback off the developmental editor. How did you pick your editor, and what was it like working with them? Was it a long process, or was your manuscript pretty much done when you got to that point, or just how does that work?
Well, I was in tears several times. I almost broke up with her. It was a very, very difficult process. I think it's akin to getting a PhD in writing. It was very difficult because no matter what I wrote, and I wasn't in a space where, you know, I was under so much stress of writing and finishing it on time that I wasn't giving it my best shot. So then I had to step back for a while and then go back and write a fresh draft. And that's when I got it right. And it took me a couple of years to do that.
And how did you pick yours?
How did I pick my editor? It was through a writer that I had interviewed for my publication.
Do you want me? Are you ready?
I can.
Through Atlanta Writers Club, I met Ali Machette, who does a lot of classes and work with writers, and through her agency, she also offers developmental editors. This was a kind of a noted editor from New York City. Cost me $4,000, and I had a multi-stage kind of plan. One, he would read the entire thing, give me comments, written comments on the electronic version of the manuscript. Then I would have a telephone conversation with him. And then I would rewrite to a deadline, and then he would read it again, and he'd give me further comments and a telephone conversation. So at the first read, like you, I don't know that I cried because I have a hard time with that, but it was sort of like, what the is he talking about? He said, the overall issue is, this is a memoir, and memoir is all about reflection. And here's where you reflected well. Here, here, and here. Here's where you need to reflect more. Here, 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 here. All over the place. So like, oh, okay. Then he said, your first chapter does not do what a first chapter should do. And you all know what a first chapter should do. He said, but chapter 17 does exactly that. He said, move 17 to 1, and you know what that means. That means the whole thing has to move around, and you have to build new segues into the story and smooth over where 17 came out. And but after I did all of that, and I actually did that to a deadline, it scared the pants off me, because I thought I'm accountable to this guy. I'm invested in myself. I have to do this. And the result was a much improved manuscript when I had thought it was done. My critique groups, but remember, the critique groups mainly get a chapter at a time, and this was like the whole thing. The whole thing. Of course they look for character arc, story arc, everything. All the elements. But it's the big picture look. And it turned out for me to be a wonderful experience. After it was over.
And so I found my book doctor because she was a friend of my partner's. And so that was the connection there. She'd written a couple of books herself. And it was a really positive experience. It was, line edits and questions, and you considered this, and why are you doing this? It was never, you have to do this, you have to do that. And the deadlines were a little soft because it wasn't really a business transaction. It was more of a, someone we knew stepping in to be part of a team, So it was a very positive experience for me. But I will say that agents and publishers, I think somebody said it earlier, it's not the first time, but they like to get manuscripts that are in really good shape. So there's less work to do when you do get to the publisher.
It's a great point. Yes?
Veena had mentioned something about her marketing team or someone she had hired. I wondered if she could speak to that.
Well, when I won the manuscript contest, I won a book deal and a publicity deal, which means a book publicist who offered this service free of charge. And I was very fortunate because they are very expensive. And Book Sparks, which is part of the She Writes Press family, was my book publicist, and they did a wonderful job. They worked on my book for about 3 months before it got published, and they found me all these national publications. My book was featured in Newsweek, Parade, Travel and Leisure, and a bunch of other online digital publications. The Deep South magazine, not the AGC though, which probably had the same problem that you did. They didn't want to publicize She Writes Press because it's a hybrid press. Did you have any other question about finding a publicist?
Just that was,
okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
This question is for Jeffrey. Did the publisher give you any pushback for getting an agent after they had made you an offer?
No, I didn't sign the contract, so no. She was, when I signed with the agent, she was my representative. She had every right to speak on my behalf.
Right.
And it was, and I'm glad I did it. it was, I think I mentioned this in an earlier session too, but you know, if you're unagented, if anyone, the Authors Guild is a great resource. They have a legal team, and they will review contracts on your behalf and give you advice, which is, you know, what an agent, a literary agent does. But if you go down the road without a literary agent, that's a really great resource. I encourage you to join and take advantage of it. And Benji?
What was the commission on the deal that was already in? Like, what was the agent's eventual commission on the deal that was already offered?
The agent gets, I think, 15%.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though you have.
Yeah, but I hadn't signed anything.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying it would have gone, wouldn't that 15% have gone to you?
It's worth it to me.
I see.
Because I'm trying to,
No, it makes
you know,
sense.
build a career, and,
Yeah.
and I thought I would make mistakes that would cost me much more money than that, probably. So, but yeah, I think yes. The answer to your question is yes, I guess. I didn't really think about it.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Jeffrey, didn't you say you stayed with the publisher who had given you an offer before you went out to find an agent, right?
Well,
The
they
one who
made an
wanted to-
offer. Yes.
The one who wanted to diversify.
Yes, I signed with them eventually. I didn't sign with them. I said, thank you for that offer. May I think about it? And I took 4 months to think about it. And in the intervening months, I found a literary agent who then contacted them and says, I'm Jeffrey Dale Lofton's literary agent. Can we talk?
Oh, okay.
So she was my voice at that point. I didn't call back. I didn't respond to that
So
offer.
it was the publisher, but but you didn't get things going till the agent was on
Yeah,
board.
they made the offer and I said, oh, thank you. I'll get back to you. May I get back to you? And they said yes.
And I think all of us can take great advice from what Jeffrey did. When you get an offer, maybe don't immediately jump on it, think about it. We all want to hear, yes, would you? You know, we all want that to be published, but I think it was really smart.
I was also willing to lose the deal, I think, because I felt strongly that I didn't feel equipped to handle this journey on my own. I just didn't know anything about the industry. And, you know, after a year, had I not gotten a literary agent and that deal was no longer on the table, I might have thought, well, you know, I probably should have done it. But I tried to learn not to regret things, to make decisions based on what I knew at the time. And it worked out. But I really wanted to go on that journey with a literary agent, if possible.
I'm really curious, what is it in each of your background or experience made you decide, I need to tell this story, I need to write this book? Because writing is hard, and as you've been saying, the journey to publication and even after is difficult.
I grew up in an abusive, dysfunctional home, and was the child who was chronically 17 years worth of physical and emotional abuse. And it was only through school and church where adult mentors, my teachers, empowered me, that I felt whole and safe and important and smart and all of that. And as I became an educator myself, and as I saw the children with whom I was working and learned a little bit more about the world, I realized, you know, my story is really simply a case study for childhood trauma. And here, when the Surgeon General says mental health is the defining health issue of our times, and the Secretary of Education says, you know, what are we going to do about this toxic environment that teachers and public schools are facing now? I mean, that wasn't all said when I started writing, but I knew those things. even when I started writing, I could see that teachers were not respected the way that teachers were when I started out. And it's sort of like we need to rethink the way we view the elders in our lives and the elders that our children are facing every day. And many children, like the vulnerable ones that I was, look to those teachers as a stable, empowering force. So the book is written for those people, for what I call the invisible walking wounded, and those educators who ever doubt their power. So I felt like I had a mission, and I'm still on that mission.
Like Beverly, I'm also drawn to stories with a social justice angle. I'm drawn to stories of immigrants who balance the two worlds. And I'm drawn to emotionally hard-hitting stories of love and loss. So I think when I sat in front of my blank page and started crafting my story, it was important for me to bring all these factors together. And like I said, I'm also a journalist during the day, and I see a lot of instances of abuse, isolation, and some of these, I wouldn't say the story is not autobiographical altogether, but there are some parts of Tara, the protagonist, in me. And so it was very important for me to write about these issues. And I know for a fact that my book, now that it's out, has reached the hands of people who need it the most, victims of violence, and people who are just so isolated they don't know where to turn for help. And I know for a fact that my book has given them some sense of peace, some sense of hope.
So my apologies to folks who've already heard this, but I didn't really know I was writing a book when I started to write it. I started writing Ray Clay Susie when I left home to go to college in LaGrange, Georgia. And it was the first time I was away from home. It was 30 miles down the road, but it was so far away in some ways, because I, for the first time, was years of pent-up frustration and humiliation and anger started to bubble out of me. Because from the earliest age, 4 or 5 years old, as early as I can remember, I was the target of bullying and body shaming and rejection from even members of my own extended family. And I had these white hot memories of, my family and friends started to bubble forth it was like a wave broke in my head over a dam, and I was just awash in these white hot memories. And I started, as a natural instinct, to journal. No one said, "Why don't you write it down? It might make you feel better." I never thought of it in that way. I just started to write, and it was a salve. It was so comforting. I've come to think of it as an exorcism by exposition. I've said that a couple of times. And I actually put it away. I got so overwhelmed with coursework, that I didn't have time for it. And I thought, okay, I'll come back to it. I'll get myself together school-wise, get my college sea legs under me, and I'll go back to it. But I didn't go back for decades. Fast forward to just a few years ago, and I have always been a voracious reader, and I read 2 books in succession. And one I reread, To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it as a teenager, but I read it again. I wanted to read it as an adult, and I wanted to know how I would respond to Scout's story, another outsider child from the South, as an adult. And the next week I read Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. And those 2 books, one read after the other, the proximity of them, there was a spark, and I caught fire. It really is the power of literature, what it can do for you, to you. And I was 19 years old again. A middle-aged 19-year-old. It's a sad sight. And I went and I pulled out those journals and I started to read them, and I was frankly embarrassed about how raw and emotional they were. And I knew that I was not over this. I thought I had gotten all past it, you know? But I just pushed it even further down inside of me. And so I started to write again on my mobile phone, on the train going to and from my job at the Library of Congress. And I wrote the first draft on my mobile phone.
Wow.
I started writing it for myself, but about halfway through I thought I wasn't writing it for myself anymore. I was writing it for young people today who are in crisis. 41% of queer kids last year seriously considered killing themselves, and 14% actually tried. And that's wrong.
I think we're on social missions here.
Yeah. So,
all three
like
of us.
Beverly and Veena, I wrote to help other people. I really believe that. And so I wrote it for my fellow fringies. I've always thought of myself as living on the outside, looking in at a world that never made sense to me, never matched what I felt deep down in my heart. And that hurts. People should not live in isolation. Outsiders need to band together. And so I wrote this as a roadmap of sorts to help them maybe find their way. And that's why I'm giving a portion of proceeds to the Born This Way Foundation and the Trevor Project to help them do the important work they do every day to help at-risk youth. Not to just enrich their lives, but to help them save lives. And that's why I do it.
I had a question that I was going to ask about if each one of our panelists could travel back in a time machine, get in the TARDIS and go back in time and talk to their younger self and give themselves advice. But I've really been thinking about what Jeffrey said about you try really hard not to second guess decisions that you made at the time. And I think that's very wise. It's wonderful advice for all of us. So I guess I'm going to reframe the question a little bit and just say, what one piece of advice could you give our attendees here who have come to Broadleaf to learn, to grow as writers, and to cultivate their career wherever they are? If you could impart, well, you can, please impart one piece of advice here for our attendees that you learned on your journey to publication.
Be fearless. Tell your story if you're writing a memoir. Write your ideas, whatever they are. You know, don't be afraid to do that. Be fearless. It's the advice one of my teachers gave me when I didn't quite win the spelling bee. She said, "You were fearless. You were the smallest one up there. You were the youngest one up there, and you were fearless." So I try to take that advice to heart even today.
I have just 3 words of advice. Don't give up. I think perseverance is a very, very important trait for an author.
I think those are such great advice. And I agree with that. I echo that. Before I queried that, before I sent the query letter to that acquisitions editor at Post Hill Press, I had tangential connections to 2 literary agents. And friends, well-meaning friends, said, "Let's send it to my literary agent. They'll love you." And I spent months with that query letter at one agency. When it finally came back, after a few months, the answer was no. Did it again with the nephew of someone I knew. Stayed there several months, came back no. I wasted several months. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket. Query multiple agents at one time. I think that because if a no comes back from one of them, if I'd been querying several agents, literary agents at that time, when that one I had like, okay, they're gonna take me because they know somebody I know. When it came back, no, I wouldn't say I was devastated, but I was like, oh my gosh, what now? Now I've got to start all over. And had I had other, queries out there, I would have thought, okay, got some others, not all lost, so I don't have to start over. So my advice is do not just query one at a time. Get 5 out there at least. I think if your manuscript is in good shape, do 1 a week, 2 a week, 3 a week, whatever you can bear. But keep the stream, get the stream going and keep it running. It's a numbers game. And there are a lot of literary agents out there. And if you believe in your work, somebody else is going to love it. You just got to find them. It's a numbers game. Do not give up. And stay connected, find community and stay connected to community. It's much less lonely. And when the success comes, it's so much better to celebrate it with people you've gone on that journey with. And in their success, you can help them celebrate too.
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful note to end our panel today and to end our session. I'd like to invite Zach to come up to speak with us. But thank you very much for attending this last session.
Please have my chair.
This is the fun part of the day where we have no idea what I'm about to say. Well, we made it. I hope you all had a great weekend. This is where you let me know, yes, you silence is not the answer. No. I hope whatever you gained from this weekend that you carry with you out these doors and back to your house. Whether you are 6 minutes away or drove 6 hours to get here, it doesn't matter. Carry it with you and keep the connections that you've made this weekend. You are the one person, as I said in the welcome, but now you have a community. And what you do with that community is entirely up to you. We are always here. I am always here to help you in any way that I can, to offer any advice that I can, to even facilitate any connections that I can. But as it relates to the people you have found here today or reconnected with here today, stay with them, talk to one another, share your journey. You don't have to be alone in this anymore. You are part of the Broadleaf community, and you are a writer, and you are going to go tell great stories, and you are going to find whatever success you can find as long as you just keep going. Matt, thank you, Jeffrey. That may be the end of the motivation I have, but I do want to leave you with a couple of things. I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't remind you again that we will be doing this next year for the big number 9. One shy of double digits. We haven't quite gotten to our teen years, but we're getting out of, I think, maybe Barbie dolls and moving into the next toy. I don't know. It's been a long time since I was 9 and I didn't have Barbie dolls, so maybe that's a terrible analogy. But we're getting there. We're growing, and with your help in the surveys, or as somebody referred to them earlier, scorecards. If you will take the time to put your comments in there. Yes, fill out the rest of it too, but your comments will help us decide or understand better what we need to do to service you. And they're extremely valuable to us. So pre-registration for next year. The special is good through the week. Surveys / scorecards, because I really like the sound of that. Please fill those out. And also, you are part of a community, and if you would like to become a member of Broadleaf Writers, you can do that on the broadleafwriters.com website. Membership is more than just giving us $40 for your annual fee. You do get discounts on registration. We have monthly meetings that are virtual, once a quarter in person, but we do try to stream anything that we can. So we're working on all kinds of ways to use tech to keep everybody involved. There are marketing consultations available. We do member spotlights, meaning that Jessica's the one that's in charge of this. We have interviews with members, and we talk about where you're at as a writer. We spotlight you on all of our social channels and our website and in our newsletter. And it's an opportunity to share your journey with more people and hopefully connect with more people. We have free book giveaways on writing, sometimes on writing. I just will never stop making that joke. But we're constantly trying to add to the benefits of being a member of Broadleaf Writers, and we hope that if you have not already, that you will join us. And if you have already and are curious about whether or not your renewal is coming up, please send me an email and I can find that answer for you. But we're all tired now, and we're tired of listening to me talk, or at least I am. I wish you all the best. Keep in touch, and have safe journeys home, and best to you and your writing, and we love you all.
Thank you.